The war between the human coalition and the alien Zarnak Empire had raged for years, leaving destruction in its wake. Now, after countless battles and millions of lives lost, the final confrontation had arrived. Queen Varina, the fierce ruler of the Zarnak, stood aboard her command ship, watching as her fleet fought bravely against the human forces. Her eyes were cold, filled with the determination that had guided her through the darkest times. But today, even her strength felt tested. The humans had outsmarted them again. Their new weapons, developed by a secret faction within their ranks, tore through the Zarnak defenses like a storm. The Zarnak warships fell, one by one, under the humans' relentless assault. As the battle grew more chaotic, Varina's thoughts turned to her son, Prince Jal. Jal had been on the front lines, leading his troops with the same fire and bravery that had made him the pride of the Zarnak people. The young prince was not just the future of the empire. He was her heart, her hope for a better future. If anything were to happen to him, the empire would crumble. The communication system crackled to life. The voice of Commander Torkev, her most trusted general, filled the ship. "Your Majesty, we've received reports. The prince has been killed in action." Varina's heart froze. "What do you mean killed?" "The human forces captured him during the final push. He was struck down in the battle," Torkev explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. A cold rage washed over Queen Varina. She could barely process the words. Jal, her only son, the future of her people, was dead. The thought of losing him to the humans was unbearable. Varina clenched her fists, her nails digging into the armrests of her throne. For a moment, she was silent, struggling to breathe through the crushing weight of grief. Her mind raced. Jal had always been a warrior, strong and capable. He had survived so many battles. The fact that he was gone didn't make sense. But if it was true, if the humans had truly taken him from her, she would make them pay. She stood up from her throne, the anger burning in her eyes. "Prepare the fleet for a final assault," she commanded. "The humans will not get away with this. We will destroy them all." Torkev hesitated for a moment. "But, Your Majesty, do as I say." Varina's voice was sharp, and there was no room for argument. "We will not rest until every human on this planet is wiped out. Let the galaxy know that the Zarnak do not forgive." As her command ship prepared to launch into battle, Queen Varina stared out into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled coldly back at her, like the eyes of 1,000 witnesses to her rage. But inside her, something had shifted. The fire of war had burned away her sorrow, and in its place, there was only the thirst for vengeance. The humans would pay, no matter the cost. And in that moment, Varina swore an oath. If her son was truly gone, then the universe would suffer for it. There would be no peace until the human race was destroyed. Sergeant Caleb Hawk stood at the edge of the human command center, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. The war was over, at least for now. The Zarnak had been defeated, their forces broken and scattered. The victory had been hard-earned, and humanity celebrated the end of the bloodshed. But Caleb's mind was far from the cheers and celebrations. There was a secret he carried with him, a secret he could never share with anyone. During the final battle, when the human forces had pushed into the heart of the Zarnak fleet, Caleb had seen something that haunted him to this day. As the smoke cleared and the fire of explosions lit up the battlefield, Caleb had found the Zarnak prince, Jal, badly wounded. The young alien leader was lying on the battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen soldiers. Caleb's orders were clear: leave no Zarnak alive. But when he looked into Jal's eyes, he saw something that made him hesitate: fear, pain, and a flicker of hope. Jal had been badly hurt, unable to defend himself. Caleb, against all instinct, decided to help him. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the look in the prince's eyes, or maybe it was his own growing weariness of the endless war. Caleb wasn't sure. But he did what no soldier should have done. He took the prince and ran. He dragged Joel to the nearest human medical facility, hiding him from the rest of the military, knowing that if anyone found out, both their lives would be in danger. The medical team had done their best, but Joel's condition remained critical. Caleb watched over him day and night, making sure the prince was kept hidden from prying eyes. It wasn't easy. The war had left everyone on edge, and rumors spread like wildfire. No one believed that the prince was still alive. They all thought he had been killed in battle. Caleb's life was full of lies now, and the weight of his secret grew heavier each day. As the days passed, Caleb grew more attached to Joel. The alien prince was not the ruthless leader the humans had been taught to fear. He was young, confused, and torn between his loyalty to his mother, Queen Verena, and the reality of what the war had done to both sides. Joel's body healed, but his mind was clouded with guilt and uncertainty. He often whispered to Caleb about his mother, the queen, and the burden of the crown. Joel was a leader by blood, but not by choice. The war had taken everything from him, and now he wasn't sure what to believe. Caleb found himself torn. He had been trained to hate the Zarnak, to see them as enemies. But Joel was not the monster he had been taught to fear. Instead, Caleb saw a young man struggling with his fate. He couldn't help but wonder if there was another way, a way to stop the war without destroying the Zarnak people entirely. One evening, as Caleb sat beside Joel, the prince opened his eyes, his voice weak but filled with a sense of urgency. "I have to go back," he said quietly. "I have to tell my mother I'm alive." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He knew that if Joel returned to his mother, it would mean certain death. Queen Verena would never forgive the humans for taking her son. Yet he could see the determination in Joel's eyes. The prince had a mission of his own, to end the war. But Caleb knew that such a mission would be impossible, especially with the queen's wrath hanging over them all. "I don't know if that's possible," Caleb replied, his voice low. "Your mother, she's not going to let this go." Joel looked up at him, his eyes full of resolve. "Then I will make her see reason. I will make her understand." Caleb didn't know what to say. He didn't want to lose Joel, but he also knew that the prince was right. If Joel wanted to end the war, he had to face his mother, and that meant risking everything. Queen Verena stood at the highest balcony of her palace, staring out over the vast expanse of her shattered empire. The stars twinkled faintly in the night sky, mocking her with their calm, indifferent beauty. The universe had been at war for years, and she had watched her people bleed for every inch of ground they had gained. Yet, despite the victory over the humans, there was an emptiness in her heart that nothing could fill. Her son, Prince Joel, was gone. The future of the Zarnak Empire had been ripped away from her in the blink of an eye. Her mind couldn't fully accept the truth. Every part of her wanted to believe that Joel was out there, that he had somehow survived, and was waiting to return to her. But the news had been clear. Her son was dead, struck down by the humans in the final battle. The report had been brutal, and the evidence had been irrefutable. Joel had fallen. He had died at the hands of those he now considered her greatest enemies. The thought filled her with rage, but also with a deep, aching sorrow. Verena's chest tightened as she remembered her son. He had been so young, so full of promise. He had shown such strength and bravery in battle, leading the Zarnak forces with a fire that could not be extinguished. He was more than just her son. He was the symbol of the future of her people. And now, that future was in ruins. In her grief, Verena found herself alone, isolated from the rest of her court. Her advisors and generals tried to comfort her, but their words seemed hollow. They could not understand the depth of her pain. Only her son had ever truly understood her. Only he had shared her vision for the empire. Yet, in the silence of her private chambers, something else began to grow. It was a dark feeling, an almost consuming desire for revenge. The humans had taken everything from her, her son, her hope, her reason for living, and they would pay for it. She clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. The grief was still there, raw and powerful, but it was slowly being replaced by a fire she hadn't felt in years. She would not let Jol's death be in vain. The humans would regret ever crossing the Zarnak Empire. She would make sure of it. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, and Verena turned sharply. Commander Torkith, her loyal general, stood in the doorway, his expression grave. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Your Majesty, the war is not over. We have the resources to strike back. The humans are weakened." Verena's eyes narrowed. She had already heard enough. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice cold and filled with authority. "We will not rest until every last human is crushed beneath our heel. If my son is truly gone, then they will pay the price for their defiance." Torkith bowed his head, his face set in grim determination. "As you command, Your Majesty." Verena watched as he left, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the cost of this war, but it no longer mattered. The Queen of the Zarnak had only one goal now, to destroy the humans and avenge her son. Every ship, every soldier, every resource would be devoted to that cause. The grief she felt for Jol was a wound that would never heal, but it would fuel her until the last human was wiped from existence. As the darkness of night fell over her empire, Verena felt the weight of her decision. There would be no turning back. The Queen of the Zarnak was dead, and in her place stood a ruler consumed by vengeance. The galaxy would learn to fear her wrath. The humans had killed her son, and now they would learn what it meant to face the full fury of a broken queen. Caleb Hawke sat alone in a dimly lit room, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't escape. The weight of his secret pressed down on him every moment, like a heavy stone lodged in his chest. Jol, the Zarnak prince, was alive, and Caleb had saved him. The world believed Jol was dead, but Caleb knew the truth. He couldn't hide it forever. Jol had been in a coma for weeks, his body battered and broken from the war. But now, slowly, he was recovering. The young prince had begun to wake, and with each passing day, Caleb's guilt grew. He couldn't understand why he had made that choice. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders, not to defy them. Yet, when he had seen Jol lying there, helpless and vulnerable, he had made the decision to save him. And now, Caleb was caught in a web of lies and uncertainty. One evening, as Caleb sat by Jol's bedside, he was joined by Dr. Ilara Voss, a scientist who had been helping with Jol's recovery. Ilara was brilliant, and Caleb trusted her with his secret, even though he knew she could never fully understand the decision he had made. She was part of the human medical team working on the alien prince, but she also had a soft spot for the young alien. Like Caleb, she had witnessed the horrors of the war firsthand, but she believed there was still a chance for peace. "You're going to have to tell someone, Caleb," Ilara said quietly as she sat down beside him. "You can't keep hiding him forever." Caleb sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I know," he replied, his voice tight, "but I don't know who to trust. If anyone finds out that Jol is still alive, the whole galaxy could go up in flames. We've fought the Zarnak for years. And now I've saved their prince. What happens when the truth comes out?" Ilara looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "We can't keep running forever. If Jol is going to be a part of ending this war, he needs to be part of the conversation. We have to decide if we're going to hide him away forever or take a risk and let him help." Caleb turned his gaze to Jol, who was beginning to stir in his sleep. The prince had been through so much, and his mind was still clouded by the war. He wasn't the ruthless leader the humans had been taught to fear. Instead, he was a young man caught between two worlds, the world of his people, the Zarnak, and the human world that had taken so much from him. Jol's eyes flickered open, and he slowly focused on Caleb. His voice was weak but steady. "What is happening?" he asked, his alien eyes searching Caleb's face. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're in a human medical facility, away from the fighting. Jal's expression was filled with confusion. "Why did you save me?" he whispered. "The war, my people. They'll never forgive me for this. I'm a traitor." Caleb shook his head. "No, Jal, you're not a traitor. You're just a man caught in something bigger than both of us." Ilara spoke softly, her voice filled with empathy. "You're not alone, Jal. We want to help you stop this war. We need you to help us." Jal looked at both of them, his heart heavy with uncertainty. How? How can I help when my mother, my queen, will never accept peace with the humans?" Caleb's expression softened. "Maybe you can show her that there's a better way. Maybe you're the only one who can make her listen." Jal's gaze turned inward as he thought about the future. He had always been loyal to his mother, but deep down, he had begun to question the endless cycle of violence. He wasn't sure if he could ever change his mother's mind. But for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could end this war. But it would require a sacrifice, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to make. Caleb knew that this was the beginning of something bigger than them all. Jal had the power to change the course of history, but only if he was willing to face his past and risk everything to bring peace to both sides. It was a dangerous path, but it was the only one left. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. The news of the humans saving Prince Jal spread like wildfire, despite all attempts to keep it hidden. Whispers reached the ears of the Zarnak Empire, and before long, rumors about Jal's survival turned into undeniable truths. The humans had not only defeated the Zarnak in battle, but now they claimed to have the prince, the very symbol of the Zarnak royal line. For Queen Verena, the thought of her son being alive was both a relief and a curse. In her palace, Verena stood before her grand war table, her fingers tracing the edge of a holographic map of the galaxy. The defeat of her fleet still stung, but it was the thought of Jal, alive and in human hands, that burned through her mind. The message was clear. The humans had dared to take what was rightfully hers, and they would pay for that arrogance. She turned sharply to face her commanders, her face pale with rage. Commander Torkith, always by her side, stood tall in front of her, his posture rigid and unwavering. The rest of the council waited in silence, knowing the queen was about to make her decision. "My son is alive," Verena said coldly, her voice quiet but filled with a chilling anger. "The humans have kept him hidden. They will pay for this insult." Torkath nodded. "Your Majesty, our spies have gathered information. The humans are keeping Jal in a remote facility, a place where only a few people know his true location. We can strike swiftly, before they move him again." The queen's mind raced. She could feel the pull of vengeance tightening around her. The humans had destroyed her fleets, taken her son, and now they must be punished. But part of her mind, the quieter part, the part that still remembered the boy she had once cradled in her arms, hesitated. Jal was her future, the one who would continue her legacy, her bloodline. She could not lose him again. Her voice hardened. "We will take him back. We will show them that no one dares to cross the Zarnak. The humans will feel the weight of my wrath." A cold silence fell over the room. Torkath's expression was one of concern. He had fought beside Verena for years, and he knew the cost of her decisions. He also knew that sending a full strike against the humans to recover the prince could start a new war, one that might be even worse than the one they had just fought. "But Your Majesty," he began cautiously, "there is another way. We could send a smaller team, one that might not escalate things further. If we rush in with everything we have, we risk provoking a full-scale war again. There may be a chance." Verena cut him off, her voice sharp. "The humans will not be given a choice. This is no longer about strategy. It is about retribution. My son is a symbol, and I will not allow him to be used as a pawn in their games. We will strike hard and fast." Torkith bowed his head, understanding the danger of disobeying her. He had seen the cold fire in her eyes, the way her grief had twisted into something fierce. He could not stop her. Not now. As Verina's fleet began to mobilize, she sat alone in her private chambers, her thoughts lingering on Jal. The prince had always been her pride, her hope for a brighter future for the Zarnak. But the war had taken so much from her. Now, Jal's survival felt like both a blessing and a curse. Could he truly lead her people to peace, or would he fall under the weight of his mother's demands, just as the war had broken so many others? Verina knew that the moment she set her plan into motion, there would be no turning back. The war had taken everything from her, her fleets, her people, and now, perhaps, her son. But in her heart, she felt one thing clearly: she would reclaim him, no matter the cost. And when she did, the humans would know that the Zarnak Empire was not to be trifled with. The clock was ticking. The hidden facility was silent, its sterile, metallic walls humming with quiet energy. Caleb Hawke sat in his small quarters, staring at the half-finished cup of coffee in his hands. His mind was a battlefield of its own, torn between duty, fear, and a growing sense of responsibility. For weeks now, he had kept Prince Jal hidden from the rest of the world, but the weight of the secret was crushing him. The truth could no longer stay buried. He glanced at the small bed in the corner of the room where Jal lay, still recovering from his injuries. The prince's once proud and determined face was now pale, worn with the stress of war, his alien features somehow softer in sleep. Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in the middle of something much bigger than he ever imagined. His role had always been clear: follow orders, fight for his people. But now, Jal had become more than just an enemy leader. He had become someone Caleb was beginning to understand. Someone he could see as more than just a symbol of a war they had to win. Jal stirred in his sleep, his brow furrowed, and Caleb instinctively stood to check on him. The prince's eyes flickered open, still filled with confusion. "I feel strange," Jal whispered, his voice weak, but carrying a hint of fear. "What are they going to do to me?" Caleb sat beside him, his expression calm but troubled. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No one will hurt you. You're not their prisoner. Not anymore." Jal's alien eyes searched Caleb's face, trying to make sense of the soldier's words. "You say that now, but when they find out what you've done, what you've saved me from, they'll call you a traitor. The humans will never forgive you." Caleb couldn't deny the truth in Jal's words. Every part of him had been trained to fight the Zarnak, to destroy their empire. And now he was protecting the very prince who led the war against them. He had always believed that the Zarnak were the enemy. But Jal was different. The prince wasn't like the stories or the propaganda that painted him as a ruthless monster. He was just a young man, forced into a position he didn't choose, struggling with the same feelings of loss and doubt that Caleb had faced during the war. "We'll figure it out," Caleb said, trying to reassure the prince, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing Jal or himself. "We don't have to go back to the fighting. We can stop the war. You can be a part of that." Jal sat up slowly, his eyes haunted with the weight of his mother's legacy. "I want to stop the war," he said quietly. "But I can't just walk away from my people, Caleb. I can't run from what my mother expects of me." The words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. He knew Jal's internal struggle, but he hadn't fully grasped the weight of the prince's position. His mother, Queen Verina, was not just a monarch. She was a force of nature, ruthless and unyielding in her determination to lead the Zarnak Empire. Jal, by birthright, was her successor, and to defy her was a dangerous choice. "Then we'll figure out how to bring peace," Caleb said, his voice firm now. "I won't let you go back to her if it means the end of both our people. I believe there's a way to stop this, together." Jal looked at him, his eyes flickering with a mixture of hope and fear. "And if she doesn't listen? If she comes for me?" Caleb's expression darkened, his mind turning over the implications. Queen Verina was not a woman who forgave. If she learned that Jal was alive, she would stop at nothing to get him back. If they stayed here, they would be hunted. If they left, they would be pursued across the galaxy. There was no easy way out. "We'll have to be ready," Caleb said, his voice low and filled with resolve. "But whatever happens, Jal, we fight for the future, not just for survival." Jal looked away, lost in thought. The reality of what they were about to face seemed overwhelming. Yet, in the darkest corners of his heart, a flicker of hope remained. Maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to end the war. But at what cost? As Caleb left the room to prepare for what lay ahead, he knew that the choices they were about to make would change everything. The fate of their people, both human and Zarnak, rested in their hands. The Zarnak fleet was ready. Queen Verena stood on the bridge of her flagship, her dark eyes fixed on the stars beyond. Her mind was consumed by one thought: reclaiming her son. The humans had taken him, hidden him away, and now she would stop at nothing to bring him back. The battle for Jal's survival was far from over, and Verena was prepared to unleash the full power of her empire to make sure the prince was hers once more. She had sent her best soldiers, her most loyal commanders, to hunt for Jal. Commander Torketh, her right-hand man, had been tasked with leading the search. His reputation as one of the fiercest warriors in the Empire was well known, and Verena trusted him to find her son, no matter the cost. "We will not fail, Your Majesty," Torketh had assured her when she had given him his orders. His voice had been filled with conviction, but deep down, he knew the task ahead would not be easy. The humans had proven to be resilient, resourceful, and far more difficult to track than expected. They had hidden Jal well, and the Zarnak's best spies had been unable to pinpoint his exact location. Verena's anger only grew with each passing day. The humans thought they could outwit her. They thought they could hold her son hostage. But they didn't understand the true power of the Zarnak. She would bring them to their knees. Torketh and his team scoured the human-controlled space with precision. They tracked every lead, followed every whisper of where Jal might be. The humans, though, had grown cautious. They knew the Zarnak would be coming for the prince, and they were doing everything they could to keep Jal hidden. In the quiet corners of the universe, Caleb, Hawk, and Jal continued to remain out of sight, always on the move. They had been forced to abandon their previous location and relocate to another secret facility, one that was even more difficult to track. They knew the Zarnak would be closing in, and Caleb, though determined to keep Jal safe, knew the humans couldn't protect him forever. But as the Zarnak fleet neared human space, something unexpected happened. A small group of human rebels, people who had been fighting against the Zarnak long before Caleb, caught wind of the prince's survival. They knew that Jal's return could change everything. If the prince could speak with his mother, if he could find a way to make her understand the futility of the war, there was a chance for peace. But the humans had no way of knowing whether Jal would survive his reunion with the queen. In a hidden base on a desolate moon, Caleb met with a small group of these rebels. They were desperate for change, determined to do anything they could to help end the war. Their leader, a woman named Asha, had heard rumors about Jal's survival and was willing to take risks to ensure he had a chance to speak with his mother. "We know the Zarnak will find us soon," Isha said, her face hard with determination. "But if Jal can speak to his mother, if he can stop her from this madness, we could finally put an end to the fighting. We just need to get him to her alive." Caleb nodded, knowing how dangerous the plan was. But he also knew that they had no other choice. The rebels would help them reach a neutral zone where Jal could make contact with Queen Verena. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. "Let's make sure we're ready," Caleb said. "We're not just running from the Zarnak anymore. We're trying to change the course of history." As they prepared for the journey, Caleb's heart pounded with uncertainty. The plan was risky, and there was no guarantee it would work, but the fate of the galaxy depended on their success. Jal, though reluctant, knew what he had to do. He had to face his mother, the woman who had once been his idol, and convince her that there was more to life than war and vengeance. The Zarnak fleet was closing in, and time was running out. The hunt had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The journey to meet Queen Verena seemed impossible. Yet, against all odds, Caleb, Hawk, and Jal were making their way toward a small, hidden spaceport on the edge of human-controlled territory. The place was far from any major military base or city, and it was the only chance they had. The rebel group, led by Aisha, had managed to find them a way out. They would get Jal as close as possible to the Zarnak capital, where he could finally face his mother and try to end the war once and for all. The air was thick with tension as Caleb and Jal boarded the small, unmarked ship. The rebel ship wasn't fast or heavily armed, but it was their best shot. Isha had made it clear. No one could know that Jal was on board. If the Zarnak found out, it would mean certain death for everyone involved. Their only hope was to get to a neutral zone where they could make contact with the Zarnak without being detected by their enemies. Caleb glanced at Jal as the prince sat quietly, his face a mixture of nerves and determination. Despite his alien blood, Jal was not as confident as his mother, Queen Verena. He had spent his entire life following her, believing in her vision for the Zarnak Empire. But after everything he had seen, after the horrors of war, the loss, the destruction, Jal wasn't sure that the path his mother had chosen was the right one. He wasn't sure that he could convince her to stop, but he had to try. "I'm not sure I can do this, Caleb," Jal admitted, his voice quiet. "I'm not sure I can convince her to stop the war. She's my mother. She's everything I've been taught to believe in. And now, I'm asking her to give it all up." Caleb put a reassuring hand on Jal's shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here. The rebels are here. And you've got something that no one else has, your chance to speak to her directly. It may not be easy, but you've got to take the chance. For both of us." Jal nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. "And if she refuses, what if she wants to keep fighting?" "Then we'll figure it out," Caleb said with more confidence than he felt. "But we won't know unless you try." The ship's engines hummed softly as they traveled through the dark expanse of space. Outside, the stars flickered by in a blur of light, but inside, the small crew was focused on their mission. They had to reach the neutral zone. They had to get Jal close to Queen Verena and give him a chance to speak his mind. It was a dangerous mission, and if anything went wrong, the consequences would be catastrophic. As they neared the neutral zone, Aisha appeared on the ship's comm system, her face tense. "We've detected Zarnak ships patrolling the area," she said urgently. "We don't have much time. You'll need to go the rest of the way on your own. We'll cover you as best we can, but we won't be able to stay with you for long." Caleb's heart raced. The Zarnak had found them sooner than expected. This was it, the point of no return. "We're ready," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We'll make contact with them." Isha nodded, giving them one last look. "Good luck. You're the only ones who can make this right." The comm cut off, and Caleb turned to Jal. The prince was looking at him, still uncertain but resolute. "I'm ready," Jal said quietly. Caleb looked at him one last time, then turned to the control panel. He set the coordinates for the Zarnak capital, knowing that what happened next could either change the galaxy forever or destroy everything they had worked for. They had one chance, one moment to prove that peace was possible. With a deep breath, Caleb engaged the ship's engines, and they slipped into the darkness of space, heading straight for the heart of the Zarnak Empire. The ship shuddered as it entered the Zarnak-controlled space, and Caleb Hawk could feel the tension in the air. The atmosphere inside the small vessel was thick with the weight of their mission. The stars outside flickered like distant witnesses to the drama unfolding within the ship's narrow walls. Jal sat silently across from Caleb, his face a mask of determination. He was no longer the young, uncertain prince who had been saved from the battlefield. Now he was a man on the edge of a critical moment in history, one that could either end the war or lead to further destruction. They had arrived in the neutral zone, just outside the reach of Zarnak patrols, but Caleb knew they couldn't linger. They had to act quickly before the Zarnak fleet found them. Isha, the rebel leader, had arranged a meeting spot at an ancient Zarnak temple, a place where the Queen's soldiers were least likely to search. It was the perfect location for Jal to confront his mother. Caleb activated the comms. "We're close," he said, turning to Jal. "You ready?" Jal nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with the weight of what was to come. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I have to try, for the sake of both our people." The ship glided toward the surface of the temple, hidden deep within a remote mountain range on the Zarnak homeworld. Caleb could feel the sweat building on the back of his neck as they touched down, knowing full well that this could be their only chance. They had no backup, no reinforcements. This was it. The door to the ship hissed open, and Caleb led Jal out into the cool air of the temple grounds. The wind whispered through the ancient stone structures, a haunting reminder of the Empire's once great past. There was a sense of quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. They moved swiftly, avoiding the shadows where Zarnak scouts could be lurking. Every step seemed like it could be their last. Caleb kept a close eye on Jal, who was walking ahead, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The path ahead was unclear, but they had no choice but to keep moving. As they approached the center of the temple, the air grew thick with anticipation. Caleb's heart beat faster, each thud a reminder of the danger they were in. They had reached the designated meeting point, a vast open chamber that had once been a place of worship for the Zarnak, now reduced to a forgotten relic. Suddenly, a sharp voice rang out. "Prince Jal, you've returned." Queen Verena stood at the entrance, flanked by her elite guards. Her eyes locked onto Jal, her expression unreadable. There was no warmth in her gaze, only the cold, calculating look of a leader who had seen the collapse of everything she had fought for. "I should have known you would come back to me, Jal," Verena continued, her voice icy. "You cannot escape your destiny." Jal stepped forward, his chest rising and falling with each breath. His voice was steady, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I didn't come back to fight, Mother. I came to stop this. To stop you from destroying everything." Verena's face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You dared defy me. After everything I'd done for this empire, for our people, you would stand against me." "I'm not standing against you," Jal replied, his voice strong now. "I'm standing for what's left of our people. The war has cost us everything. Our families, our homes, our future. I want peace." The Queen's eyes flashed with fury. "Peace," she scoffed. "You speak of peace while our enemies still breathe. The humans are nothing but vermin, and you think you can change the future with words. You're weak, Jal." Jal stepped forward, undeterred. "I am not weak. I'm asking you to listen. We can end this. We can rebuild, not through violence, but through understanding. You can choose to lead our people into a new age." The silence that followed was deafening. Verena's gaze never left Jal, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief, rage, and something else, something that looked dangerously close to regret. "I gave you everything," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and anger. "And now you turn your back on me." "I didn't turn my back on you," Jal said softly. "I turned my back on the war. And I'm asking you to do the same." For a long moment, there was only silence. Caleb watched the Queen's face carefully, waiting for a response. Verena looked between Jal and the human soldier standing nearby, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and dangerous. "You are my son," she said, "but I will not let you destroy the Zarnak Empire." Before Jal could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the air. The Queen's guards began to move, and the tension in the room escalated. The choice had been. The moment Verena spoke, everything shifted. Her words hung in the air, sharp and final, like the last blow in a battle. "I will not let you destroy the Zarnak Empire," she said, her voice cold, filled with unyielding authority. The guards around her moved forward, their weapons raised, eyes fixed on Jal and Caleb. The room, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like a battleground. Jal's heart raced, but he stood tall, not retreating, not backing down. He couldn't. This was his moment, the only chance to change the course of history. Caleb, standing beside him, instinctively reached for his weapon, though he knew it would be no use against the full might of the Queen's elite. His hands trembled, but he stayed focused on Jal. "Mother," Jal said, his voice calm but firm, "this doesn't have to end in violence. Please, listen. You've seen the cost of this war. You've seen the destruction we've caused. It's time to stop." Verina's eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of something, an emotion she quickly buried, a doubt perhaps. "You speak of peace like it's a simple choice. Do you think the galaxy will forgive the Zarnak for their failures? Do you think the humans will forget the blood we've shed?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Jal replied, his voice steady now, with an edge of desperation. "I'm asking for a chance for both our people to move forward. We've been at war for so long, Mother, but we don't have to keep fighting. We can rebuild together." Verina stepped forward, her eyes locked on her son. For a moment, it felt as if the world itself had paused, as if the two of them were the only ones left in the galaxy. Her expression softened, but just as quickly, it hardened again, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her shoulders. "The Zarnak Empire is built on strength, Jal, and I will not let that strength be washed away by your weakness. You're just a boy who doesn't understand the cost of leadership," Verina said, her voice growing cold once more. "You cannot change the fate of our people with empty words." Jal didn't flinch. "Then let me try, Mother. Let me prove to you that we can choose a different path. I may not be the leader you want me to be, but I am the leader my people need now. Not one who brings destruction, but one who brings peace." Verina's eyes narrowed, but for a moment, there was a flicker, just a flicker, of something that resembled doubt. She looked at Jal, her son, her flesh and blood, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed uncertain. "I've spent my life building an empire," Verina said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "But maybe I've forgotten what it's all for." The guards shifted nervously, sensing the Queen's hesitation. Caleb's hand gripped his weapon tighter, ready for any move, but he could see that something in Verina was changing. Her sharp gaze softened, but she didn't let it show. She couldn't let it show. Jal stepped closer, his voice filled with emotion. "You taught me to be strong, to lead, but strength doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means knowing when to stop." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw something like hope in them. Faint, but there. For a long moment, there was silence. The room was thick with tension, the future of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Caleb held his breath, unsure of what would happen next. Finally, Verina spoke, her voice no longer filled with anger. "You are right," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "But you're also wrong. Peace is not something the Zarnak can simply choose. It must be earned." Jal nodded, his heart pounding, knowing this was the only answer he would ever get. "Then let me earn it, Mother. Let me show you that we can change." For the first time in years, Queen Verina didn't know what to say. Her empire had always been built on conflict and war, but now, standing before her son, she was faced with a choice she never thought she would have to make. Could she truly step away from the war? Could she embrace a future where peace was possible? The air was thick with uncertainty, but as Jal looked at his mother, he saw something he hadn't seen in years, a crack in her armor. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "We'll rebuild," Jal said quietly. "Together." Verina stood there, her gaze locked with her son's. Slowly, she nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "This is your battle now, Jal. Lead us well." And in that moment, a new beginning was born. The war that had consumed the galaxy for so long began to unravel, piece by piece. The Zarnak Empire would never be the same, and neither would the humans. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Jal had taken the first step toward peace, and with it, the hope of a better tomorrow. For the first time in a long time, Jal allowed himself to breathe. He had chosen a path of peace, and no matter the challenges ahead, he knew that this was the only way forward.